What the hell? And this makes sense. The only the only pang that's been heard in the last 200 years was 2 days ago. How does this make sense? Where could this have come from? Okay, I gotta do this thing. I gotta document. Just shut down. Let's go. Hello? Is this one working? Okay, good. My name is TJ. I'm from the DFP, or Dirt. I don't even remember what it was called anymore, but I've done some research on this world, and I've thought it would be fitting if I documented its timeline, its history, you know. And, well, let's just say that it goes pretty far back. Context, this here is the first documented hole in the SMP. Or, I guess it's what we call it now. Someone called it once. I figured people needed to know. Needed to know what was going on here. I guess it's only fitting that we start here with this hole again. This hole is the mine, the first mine of this timeline, the catalyst to what we are now, and what the future of now is. From there, well, the person that started the mine was a person, my variant, TJ. Founded a nation called Landa with a few people like Lomp and Cat. After this founding, it grew, players joined, all that stuff, but then there was an opposition. Across their overly protected border wall lies a femboy socialist country. I know, don't laugh, but they were serious. The players Pastel and Generic resided there. At first, TJ was paranoid, obviously, rigging the walls of the border to explode when an invasion takes place. Thankfully, it didn't. Soon after, a White House is built for the future presidents to enjoy, and a highway is built to a player named Glitch and his home. Player, Mir, helped labor in the situation, thought they didn't get compensated correctly, and sued TJ, getting arrested and all that such. Zooming through that, Mir and Glitch, well, after TJ, I guess, bombed some of their supplies, they took revenge and bombed and destroyed Landa. It came back, but Glitch and Mir were exiled from the spawn area, or where, you know, people lived. Even Cat's windmill was burnt down. Mir, I guess after the second time around, was sent to the fields to work, essentially. Do what they needed to do to make up for destroying Cat's, you know, home. Sometime late December 2020, the first Landa elections took place. TJ was the first president, but wasn't the first elected. With Nebula, with a close vote, won the first, I guess, election of this world. Or I guess he went off of Mr. Nebula. We'll call him that for now. After the election, Generic and Pastel, they escalated their terrorizing, going from TJ to harassing Nebula, or Mr. Nebula. Generic and Pastel were arrested and brought to a courthouse where, turns out, it was a setup to assassinate Nebula. Nebula was murdered in the chaos, and TJ, well, he got away. Nebula, well, in this world, people can't really die. Nebula was just injured. And, well, they stepped down. After boarding his windows, Cat took the stand as the third president of Landa. During this era, a country named Italy was founded by players Carl and Meebo. Carl and Meebo had dreams of forming an Italian mob, but it was soon brought down with the founding of Greenland and Sanctuary, two nations founded from the corpse of Landa leaders Mr. Nebula and Greenest Ruby. They had similar but differing opinions. Mr. Nebula wanted a world protected, and Green wanted unity, though not in the way people believed. Mostly because his mind was possessed by an egg, they wanted unity by, well, the hive mind. The egg, or was a piece of this thing. It's called the code. I don't really fully comprehend it myself, but essentially the egg is this corrupted entity. The corruption now possessing and controlling Green and his settlement. During this period, a fungus sprouted from the old lands of the Femboy Empire. This fungus possessed and controlled the dead body of TJ. The team of both Greenland and Sanctuary and bits of Landa, so most of the server, marched in and killed the core of the fungus. What's going on? No, that's not right. A fungus during this period sprouted and possessed the dead body of TJ. Died, and a united coalition came and killed it, with TJ dying. Not dying, he actually came back somehow. So instead, he was alive. But not in the way people want. When he came back, he realized that elections had chaotic. So he named a faction called Origin. People who seek to end the chaos and hatred of elections. Take over the world. For some reason, the order was weird. Them starting with Italy and soon rushing for Sanctuary. When they arrived, TJ, Lomp, and another player ran into Green and Mr. Nebula. They went to kill Green, but due to a skill issue, Green killed TJ, with the remaining Origin members retreating and, I guess, retiring from the faction. A few months later, Green used the egg's power to resurrect TJ, bring him back, and he was possessed. During this time, another country that had been in the shadows called Omnia Industria, led by players Fast Five, Silly Squeak, and Grim. That's right. They did an ambush attack on Greenland's capital. There were no casualties, but Omnia held their ground. With only 3 people versus probably 5, their numbers aren't everything. In retaliation, essentially the whole SMP went and attacked these people. And what they didn't realize is that they had a 4th member. Torpfish, sheriff of Landa, now I guess a member of Focia, had joined Omnia Industria, because they won. Omnia Industria fought the server and won. But they didn't win. Green, he took members that were still possessed and took them to this castle that he summoned in the sky and was preparing to end the world. Omnia Industria rushed to get up, but it wasn't enough. They lost. They fought Green. They killed him, yeah, but he had a kill switch. He ended the world. It was reset, and well, it's gone. And somehow there was a light at the end. World reborn. This one, actually, called Anomalous World Beta. This world is what essentially is left of the world after the egg, with nations sprouting up again, most forming a coalition known as the Pact of Steel. This consisted of Walanda, a TJ variant being the leader, Mr. Nebula, somehow the same person, and also Green. Green Nebula leading Sanctuary, Green leading Greenland, of course, and then a new player, Flarebreaker, founded the country Focia, with Torp joining him soon after. During this era, briefly, TJ had his scientist, Cookie Cub, using, well, energy from the Corruption Valley to make a portal to another world. From my understanding, this is the first documented moment of dimensional travel, before me, of course. During this moment, a parasite somehow escaped into this world and infected TJ. TJ was basically dead. He was in this limbo after Thomas took over his own mindscape. This character, the parasite took over, turned into a character we now know as Thomas. During this time, TJ, no one knew that he died. And the Pact of Steel had the fallen out. Arguments on the Corruption Valley weren't handled well, and the shift of ownership from Olanda to Sanctuary, for what was the capital of the Pact of Steel, there's just a lot. When this was going down, the entire territory of Olanda and the country as we know it was blown in an instant. A negatividium bomb exploded in the former Capitol building, and it wiped out Wolanda. It was all gone in an instant. It was a trap set by Oblivion, a terror group founded by Thomas, Green, and Fast Five, and technically Nado, but he betrayed the group during the Battle of Sanctuary. Speaking of which, the Battle of Sanctuary was an attack that took place mid to early summer of 2021, with Thomas, Green, and Fast Five attacking Mr. Nebula's homeland and won. The results of the combat, mostly due to the low gear quality of the enemy, had Oblivion win. They continued to win battles that they went into. Oceanside, Mexico, all kinds of countries were just taken over. The rebels couldn't do anything. At this point, about 60% of the world had been taken over by Oblivion. Bad. During this time, there was a second uprising, I guess you could say, a second battle of Sanctuary, after Oceanside, or the rebels, remnants of Pact of Steel, went to take Sanctuary back. During the battle, Fast Five wasn't present, and the Green betrayed Oblivion, casting Thomas out of the homeland. It was before Thomas took captive of Jeff, a child Mr. Nebula came across during his ventures north of the Pact of Steel lands. While Thomas retreated to his headquarters, Mr. Nebula confronted his husband. It's a Nebula. I know, it's weird. In a conversation about the battle. Effectively being about why It's a Nebula wasn't involved, his reason being, and I quote, "I was doing paperwork." After the battle, and the rebels celebrate, they begin their journey to the capital, the HQ of the Oblivion Front. The rebels build a little hole on the side of the hill and set up camp. After about a month of planning, the rebels charge the gate. But before they climb the walls, they meet Thomas on top of the gate, on the wall, as I say. Thomas brings out Jeff after a bit of talking. It was hopeful, people were hopeful, that Jeff would look down at them and hope to, well, rejoin them. A reunion, you could say. But instead, Jeff betrayed them. He joined Thomas and, well, continued the fight with what remains of Oblivion. Thomas presses a button the moment that the battle starts, and it created a massive explosion, almost killing a lot of people. It killed probably one or two, but it was a good portion of the rebels. As the battle unravels, withers were summoned by Greenest Ruby, hopefully as a distraction or some kind of buff or advantage. More bombs go off. But as it comes, it settles on Thomas, injured and cornered in the pits of the capital. The capital was relatively unharmed, but there was a massive crater in front of it. Thomas and Nebula ended up there, and, well, Thomas and Nebula ended in a final battle. As Thomas got cornered, he said his final words to Nebula, or Mr. Nebula. Then Mr. Nebula sends down his sword upon him, ending the Oblivion War in its tracks after about a month of fighting, or I guess 2 or 3. I'm not sure. I wasn't there, obviously. The capital was rebranded and deemed the capital of the new world, the new government, essentially, the world government. During this time, Greg ran off into the forest. Not Greg, Jeff. We're gonna call him Greg now. Discovering a train, or abandoned train in the forest, they lived in it. Later on, they discovered an unlikely ally. As the world begins to normalize, there are continued research into dimensional travel, but not on this side of the timeline. As discussed before, I'm a variant, and there are others like me. In a branch timeline of this one, there was a world called the Sad Lore, or Sad World. In this world, the world government had already formed, and Thomas never existed. TJ died early, and the character, Max, from Mexico, became the Emperor. He continued his legacy, winning an election for the president and taking over the world government, becoming the first and only emperor of what he calls the SMP. Like I said earlier, that's where I heard it from. The SMP is what the world, or his planet, is called. This could be insight that Emperor Max isn't any normal person. Keep this in mind. Now let's pocket that thought and first talk about TJ. Prime timeline TJ. He's dead, by all accounts. Where is he? The afterlife exists in this world, and as I've mentioned, it's called a limbo, or a reflection of the character in some way. TJ was in limbo all this time, and since Thomas took his body, basically hijacking the brain after Thomas was gone, the body was left soulless. With Thomas gone, who else to take it back but TJ? He woke up in what seems to be a teleported White House of Landa. He couldn't explain it, but that's where he woke. After that, he wasn't sure, or wasn't far from the capital, coming upon a recovering world. Though sorrow still sits on some people's shoulders, for example, Mr. Nebula, frustrated and filled with hatred at the aftermath of Oblivion, he tried hunting down remaining criminals, ending in the result of Greg, or Jeff, you know what I mean. Green grows bitter from the actions made. Because of that, Green kidnaps TJ, brings them into this ancient room full of, well, spores. But it was going into this thing that was called like a rift, or like some kind of portal in the middle of the room. And Green threw him into it, never to be seen again. After TJ's passing, Green goes off to attack the capital. Also because Greg was dead. Though this should have led to something immense, it faded. Mostly due to the fact that during this time, Emperor Max's dimensional experience got better. With the help of a scientist he recruited, an alternate form of Lomp, a variant. He was able to cause rifts in space and time, allowing Thomas to bypass the limbo world and end up in the sad world, along with Greg. Thomas ran across Emperor Max almost immediately, and he was recruited in the attempts of dimensional travel. Greg was recruited as well, but in less humane methods. A character whom wasn't mentioned before had a great deal of involvement as well with the Rift Portal. Victoria. Though not mentioned often earlier in the timeline, Victoria was the cause of future problems. They are causing some problems in my timeline, too. Not entirely their fault, but it was the butterfly effect, I suppose. Anyways, Victoria helped Emperor Max finish his portal, all that stuff, but Emperor Max didn't care for Victoria after it was done. Victoria fulfilled their purpose, and now they didn't have one. Instead of finding a new one, Emperor Max killed Victoria and beheaded them in front of Greg. This occurred mere minutes before Emperor Max enacted his plans. When morning broke on the capital, a town that's gone through hardship, as we know, Green goes in to attack. But as I said, it faded, because as that moment occurred, a portal opened in the town square. Emperor Max's forces enter the ring. Green quickly switches from his tune and helps the people of the capital to defend their reality. After gruesome fighting, they push them back and somehow have them retreat. Max's forces run off and conquer the spawn area, reconstructing an area to become a replica of his tower in the Sad World, a beacon of his power. The capital's forces, after a week of preparation, they invade the tower. Their first match being a alternate or variant version of Mr. Nebula. Quickly passing him, they fought various bird-like clones. One of Max's minions had cloning technology, and I guess they applied it by making some kind of like obstacle for each step. But that's not all they came across. After they fought the birds, they came across Greg's level. After a ferocious battle from Lomp, they defeated Greg. After arriving to the second most top level, I guess, they come across a not so mentally stable Thomas. Coming to a close, but very brief battle, Lomp goes to slice Thomas. Before he could, a corrupted portal appears and grabs Thomas, pulling him through, unsure of his outcome for a few hundred years at most. Moving to the top level of the Prime Timeline, members walk upon Emperor Max sitting on his throne. As the world is being torn up and blown away by surrounding withers and various battles, the top of the tower experiences its height of battle. As Max inches closer to the edge of the tower, Greg marches forward and lunges at him. Max dodged, but at the cost of his stability, falling into the flames of the tower. His outcome, forever unknown. Capital forces leave the tower to find Green. Fighting their way through a path of withers, they find him again at an ancient tomb. As I said, the room that TJ was murdered in. The rift left a line between Green and the others. Before a fight even broke out, Green suddenly jumped into the rift. He had this speech that insinuated that he was fighting something in there, but no one actually knows who or what. After a few weeks of construction, the world is back again. Everyone's happy, but Mr. Nebula can't stay still. He decides to leave his land. He leaves it to Greg. Not Greg. Greg's dead. No, Greg's alive. He leaves it to Greg and Meebo. And he finds a world that he should never have found, honestly. A world called Wild Rift. Not essentially a world, more like a continent, but we'll get into that later. While Mr. Nebula, leaving his lands behind to come across an entirely different environment, there was others that had already appeared. People from different points in time or entire alternate worlds have arrived to this one area of the world. Wild Rift is an anomaly in the timeline due to its existing from one person. It's a bubble. And that person is the debt collector. The debt collector, a really good guy. But when someone first enters the area, the debt collector makes them a deal, a contract essentially, to have them agree to exist in Wild Rift. As soon as the world forms, variants of each character mentioned are invited to this world. The only people to really carry over being Green, after years locked in the void, and Mr. Nebula coming to the shore. The rest arrive through selective choosing of the debt collector, each people grouping together. Bobby, a variant of Greg, formed a group called Meow, hoping to keep some peace, while Emperor Max forms his own group with a TJ variant and Lomp variant, forming the most serene mercantile federative business republic of Neo-Maxtopia. Maxtopia for short. Max's goals for this world is to collect stones for the debt collector. Rift stones, to be exact. Rift stones are powers left over from a rift god who's passed on. As all of this goes on, fungus is slowly growing. Fungus that slipped in the cracks of what's known as the code. From what I understand, the code is everything and everyone, but I'm not sure. The fungus is some form of branch of the egg, an entity we already know. That collector meets with the fungus and sort of merges with it, allowing the fungus to speak through his body. After some I need to check something. Okay, we're fine. After the merging, some disagreements and some arguments later, the debt collector departs from the fungus, but it still physically, morphed his body, still leaving vines and roots and all that. As Maxtopia searches for rift stones, other people begin to notice too, forming a faction called the Pact to also search for the stones. Search builds to a final showdown between Emperor Max and the Pact in front of a multiversal portal. Emperor Max pulling out 3 of the 4 stones, wiping out all but Green. Green survives after making a last-second deal with an entity known as the Admin, sealing away his godlike powers once again, only to be revealed at a later point, obviously. While Green survives, Max faces the Debt Collector. Realizing he's got all the eggs in his basket, he looks the Debt Collector in the eye before hopping into a multiversal portal. Jumping into a portal of potential rift stones to collect. A man declaring war on a god is a dangerous one, given infinite resources and the ability to reach it, to defeat a god. Now, the last documented event was the fungi's takeover of the planet. With no Debt Collector or other contender, the biomass spread and covered the world, dying and freezing over. The last documented event was a technological ping of self-service roughly 200 years ago, I think. And we're roughly 500 or so years past the freeze over date. There's only one thing that caught my eye. Many beings of higher power seem to carry a similar trait. They all look or sound like Prime TJ. Not me, obviously, I'm Southern. They all look or sound like him. They seem to always die at each era of the story, though. Landa, Alonda, Oblivion, The Pit, and many more. Never the same person, but always acting the same. That all connects to what? Why is the Debt Collector like him? Why is TJ always dying? And why am I here?
You aren't.